Hello everyone, this is Narada Rishi Raja with expeditiousfool.com, where we remove the obstacles by adding and sticking to our consistent DMP, that daily mindfulness practice. Let's go ahead and get into it today and see what advice we have from the Gita. See what Krishna has to tell the world today. Oh goodness, okay. Now, before I put this one up, I already know this verse. I'm just going to say, trigger warning. We're all in different stages of our path, that's true. So, trigger warning, but know that there's no judgment towards anyone from me whatsoever, but there are some certain truths as far as how things work. And the more and more that we learn, the more and more that we know, right? And sometimes we don't know what we don't know. So sometimes that becomes a problem. And that's the reason why I talk about the receptiveness and being receptive to a true teacher in front of you. Because if your cup is full, it can never be filled, right? So you can't put anything else in a full cup. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into it today. The card I just pulled is pretenders. So what does Krishna say a pretender is? Well, chapter 3, verse 6 says, "Those who restrain the working senses, but continue to dwell on sense objects, delude themselves and are called pretenders." So what does that mean? That means that people that they dress spiritual, they meditate, they go to a yoga class, right? And yet they don't consistently follow the path, right? They don't do their DMP, their daily mindfulness practice. They think that maybe they don't have to, or, whatever it might be. But they like to make a big show of their spirituality, right? A lot of them are in spiritual business full time. Actually, in this country specifically, the popular spiritual ones fall into this category. Because it's also not just about the practices, right? You can do the practices, but if you don't do them with karma, as a karma yoga, if you don't do them without expecting any fruits, if you don't develop the devotion, you're a pretender. And you're going to feel that, by the way. You're going to feel that in the way that internally you register, and then you're going to act accordingly, which means you're going to have some toxic traits, which means you're going to be hurting people instead of helping people. Yet, you're putting on the show with the meditation and look at this and you're putting on that as a show and not your real life. So then what does that mean? You're a pretender. It's not on the card, but it's calling to me to go a little bit further on this. The very next verse. So this is chapter 3, verse 6. The very next verse, chapter 3, verse 7. So this one again, "Those who restrain the working senses but continue to dwell on sense objects delude themselves and are called pretenders." Whereas chapter 3, verse 7 says, "On the other hand, if a sincere person tries to control the active senses by the mind and begins karma yoga and that's karma yoga, and in order to do karma yoga properly, you have to have bhakti, which is devotional consciousness." So anyways, so begins karma yoga in bhakti without attachment, he is by far superior. So what does that mean? That is letting you know, it's not, no, there's better and lesser people. That's not what's meant by the term superior. What means is the Bhagavad Gita is a book about your spiritual path. It's letting you know that they're a little bit closer to the truth. They're doing it properly. They're walking the walk. They're talking the talk. There's 100% authenticity there, right? Because when we're pretending, here's the thing. All you're going to do is you're going to confuse other people, and the more people that you confuse, you'll confuse yourself. That's why it's so bad to be a pretender. Not because of its judgment, not because I'm passing a judgment and being like, you need to have pain because you're doing this. No, it's just what will happen by you not being authentic. And you saying that you're following a spiritual practice when you know you're not, then you won't look for a new spiritual practice, right? So it puts you in a spot of not being able to proceed forward, which you'll feel by anxiety, depression, and suffering. It's the reason why I tell you, when we're looking for our spiritual leaders, when we're looking for our healers, you look for a spiritual leader or a healer. If you want deep, deep healing, if you want true healing, you don't want a pretender. You look for one that doesn't have anxiety. Because yes, it's possible. Is it rare? Yes, because so many of these are out there. But they have no anxiety. Their whole life is the service. That's it. That's what I would look for. That's what I do look for in my healing team. That's what I recommend everyone to look for in their healing team. And yes, again, I do this full time. This is why I said trigger warning, because when I say this, some people get upset because they're in business and they're in spiritual business and they have this spiritual ego and this spiritual identity they've created. So when we talk about this stuff, they get upset because they know there's things they're not doing. They know there's ways they could better show up. It's just a level of commitment. And when I choose my healing team, I choose somebody that's totally committed to their healing first, right? Because if they're not, you get that healing through a filter. And committed to their healing, not their ego. Not being a healer. No, committed to their healing. All right, everybody. That's what Krishna has for you today in the Gita. Don't get mad at me. We're just talking universal spiritual truths here. And it's all based off of, we can do the practices, but do you have the devotion? If you don't, the practices are hollow, right? And to end this off, because I feel I need to go a little bit further, I know this is going a little bit long. Hanuman, it's behind me. This is one of my favorite stories. Sita came down and she was bestowing blessings and giving gifts to all kinds of people at the time. Sita is like the feminine representation of Godhead, goddess, right? And she gives Hanuman a mala, prayer beads. And he looks at it and he's looking at it all over, and then he starts biting them and crushing them. Throwing the broken bead on the ground. Then he goes to the next one. All of a sudden, the villagers around, they start seeing him doing this, and they start getting angry. He's disrespecting the goddess, right? How dare him? And he's supposed to be this great devotee. How could he disrespect this goddess by destroying this gift she just gave him, right? And when they confront him about it, he says, well, I'm looking for Ram and Sita inside here. Right? They're like, what do you mean? They're like, well, if Ram and Sita are not inside these beads, what use are they? Right? And this is, like I said, one of my favorite stories, because this is a process. It's a japa meditation. You go through names of God, right? And then the villagers, they got even more mad, and they said that they were going to kill him if he could not prove that Sita and Ram was in his heart. And that, boys and girls, is where we get the wonderful picture of Hanuman with his chest ripped open, and you see Sita and Ram sitting there. Right? That is what allows you to not be a pretender, is when you have that devotion. And it doesn't matter what you call your God or goddess. It doesn't matter what you call it, but you got to be devoted 100%. If not, and you're boasting the spirituality, just know Krishna, the the Bhagavad Gita, oldest religion. Actually, the oldest spiritual path. It's not even a religion. The oldest spiritual path says you're pretending. Everybody that's followed that spiritual path the way that they say has found bliss and made it to the other side. And yes, there's a lot of people that are following it. They're experts in it that don't do it this way. This is why it's in the Gita, to let us know about the pitfalls so we can avoid them, not judgment. It's all about what's appropriate for our vibration and what's not. All right, everybody, we've got to be authentic. Thank you so much for this long video from the advice from the Gita today. I hope each and every one of you have a great day on purpose and stay mindful, everyone. Namaskaram.